Thank you so much. So, thank you. This event is special to me because maybe a lot of you don't know, but last year at the first edition of NgGlühwein, it was the first time that I stand in front of a crowd doing a presentation in English. So, very special to me to be able to talk here again. 1 year of doing talks. Very happy to be doing this and sharing fun with all of you. So today I wanted to talk to you about, let's say, in the past 2 or 3 years, the Angular team has been shipping a lot of feature. Every major version has been a success in terms of what has been shipped, and I feel like every team meeting we had after every release, like our next release is not going to be as big as the previous one, and every meeting it's the same way of, okay, we did it again. So Angular changed a lot, and I wanted to talk to you about how it changed and how you would write, let's say, components today. And I want to talk to you about a hypothetical world where the lifecycle hooks don't exist anymore, and how we would write our components and directive without them. So, the name of my talks, Modern Angular, the Lifecycle-Hook-Free. So I'm Matthieu Riegler, I'm a software engineer, I'm the random dude that codes on the train. I'm part of the team as an open source contributor, and you can find me on every famous social network. So, lifecycle hooks. How many knows how many lifecycle hooks Angular has?
7.
I got a good answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Good answer, I got 8 before. So ng on init, ng on changes, ng do check for ng after hooks, and ng on destroy. I'll go through all of them and show you how you can replace them today with some interesting new semantics. First, the first one is called when you create a directive, a component, ng on init. So this one, we use it, first, ng on init has been until, I think, V17, we had this recommendation on the Angular docs that's told you, yeah, ng on init is the best way to do initialization. And it was, until removed it, and because we're thinking like, you don't actually need it anymore. And I'll show you why. An example, ng on init, you have some inputs, either decorator inputs or signal inputs. As you know, you cannot access them inside a constructor. You need to wait that the component has been initialized by the framework. It means the classes need to be constructed, and the framework needs to set the inits. And after they have been set, the framework is calling the ng on init for you, and here it is safe for you to call the inputs and get the values. But how can we replace it today? Modern Angular. So we use what we call state derivation, and there is also some delayed readings. First example, when you want to combine some inputs and react on it, you go with a computed, with a basic derivation. So you can read the inputs, for example here, last name, name, and you get a new signal out of it. So this computed will only be invoked when you want to read it, so in the templates, in an effect, for example. Second case, also, when we want to do some advanced derivation in some kind of local state that is also writable. Either we have link signals, something that we introduced in V19, which allowed you to have local states that's derived synchronously. So here, example, I can create a state with reading the name. Or another case, if we want to have some asynchronous derivation, we have the new resource primitive, which allows you to do some async loading and then update the states automatically. All those cases, I'm reading an input, and it works either as a property or in the constructor directly. So no ng on init. And the other case is, for example, having an effect. You can have it in the constructor, for example, and the effect in the context of a component will be executed only after the component has been init by the framework. So it means when the input have been set. So here, basic example, no ng on init, and you can safely read all your inputs. But also, another case, a function like toObservable is based on effect. So it means it has the same behavior than effect itself. So when I pass a signal here and I try to subscribe directly in the constructor, here we have an input that gets only read when the component is in it. And here, Michael, I got subscribed, it's asynchronous. We got some debate on observables. So, like I said, you can do signal input reading without any ng on it. Second hook, ng on changes. You might be probably grasping already that what I presented before is actually what we need for ng on changes. So ng on changes basically is what you use when you want to do something when an input changes. And like I said, we already covered that. Derivation just runs when you update the signal dependencies. So reacting on changes is actually at the heart of the reactivity provided by signals. Whenever a signal change, either in an effect or computed linked signal resource, it will be reread and react on this. So no hook necessary to update your states with this. Talking about this, I wanted to go a bit more deeply in what we would call effect scheduling. So when does an effect run? When are you being notified that something changed? And the first reactive primitive that was introduced with signals in v17 was effect, which you will get a rerun every time one of the dependencies that get invoked inside the effect gets changed. And in v19, we changed a bit how it worked to have something that is more correct in terms of execution. Alex will tell you a bit more, I think, about it in his talk after. So in this case here, effect will run ahead of your component being checked by the synchronization task. So it ran before, but if you would want to run after change detection, if you would run it when your app is ready because you want to make sure that, I don't know, that your whole app is finished and you want to do some other change after. We have another primitive which is after render effect that runs once the whole app has been rendered, it's been made stable, and you can do whatever changes you want by reacting on signal changes. So two primitives that run at different times depending on what exactly you want to do with them. Next, and this one, I liked it very much when it was released. It was the first new, let's say, new generation of hooks that the team released. Imagine a simple case where you have a component that has some kind of, for example, an interval that runs during the life of your component. To prevent any memory leaks, you want to stop the interval once the component gets destroyed. So what you do, you store the reference of your interval as a property, and ng on destroy, you just clear the interval. So here I have a property, the start of the interval, and then the destruction of it. How we would rewrite that with the new APIs, wrong button. Sorry. Here, we would reuse a service that we are able to inject in our component, which is called destroy-ref. And destroy-ref provides you a callback function on destroy that will be invoked once the component or the service gets destroyed. So here in my code, I create the interval inside my constructor, get the destroy-ref, schedule a non-destroy callback, and just cancel my interval. Just this way, you destroy whatever you want in the context of a component. Another use case for the destroy ref, not only in the component, but we get something that is aware of your context of execution. For example, you want to have a function that you can call wherever you want, where you say, I want the behavior baked in the function itself directly. So I inject the destroy ref, I call some service that need to be cleaned up whenever the context of execution tells him to run something to clean up. So here, destroy ref, some reference that get called when the context gets cleaned up. For components, this happens when you destroy the component, so where it's removed from the components graph. And if ever you call this kind of function inside a root-provided service, it will run only when the app itself is destroyed. So keep in mind that whenever you're doing functions that rely on destroy ref in a root-provided service, it will only run at when your application is destroyed, so mostly when you navigate away of your app. A good example of this is toSignal. toSignal subscribes to an observable to add values, to set values on signal. So there is a subscribe inside it, and if you call it in a component, for example, toSignal will make sure that your observable is unsubscribed when the component is destroyed by using destroy ref and scheduling an unsubscribe at this moment. So now the after hooks. Like I said, we have 4 of them. ng after content init, ng after content checked, ng after view init, and after view check. So the 2 pairs of them will run when there is something happening with the content of a component, so content projection, for example, and after view init, after view check, run after the whole component has been init and checked. When we say check, it has been checked by the change detection or synchronization mechanism. Example of the use case, I remember you used it a long time ago already. Imagine you are in an app and you're using some external library and you want to set up for example, a charts library. Charts library often expect a div or a canvas. So you say, okay, I'm checking by a view child a canvas. I want to get a reference, and I pass it directly to the init function. And I will do this once the element is already available. So what I need to do is to do it after view init. So when it's been created and it's present in the DOM. And if ever I want to do something that runs every time we have change detection, we do it in an after check method. How we evolve from this? So without the hooks, if we want to run only once a function, we go for the after next render. After next render will run once your whole app has been rendered and will init it. So you are sure that when you put something in after next render, your component has been rendered, so everything that should be here is accessible, and you can read a view child and pass it to whatever function you need. So this one runs once, and it can replace both after content init and after view init. The after view init and after content init run only once when it created the first time the template. If ever you want to run every time change detection runs, you do it with the after render function. So it runs every time the app has been fully rendered, so you know that everything is up to date, and Angular tells you here is the best moment to do something, for example, reading the DOM or writing to it. And it will replace the 2 functions that were called previously after each check. What's interesting about this function is a performance-oriented API. I know that my 2 best performance experts, or even 3, love these kind of things. And the first time I saw that, I was like, why the hell did we make such a complicated API? I went to my perf expert, Nia, behind you. What was really the purpose behind it? I couldn't really grasp the issue. You have to know that how browser work. How do we interact with the DOM APIs and how it affects performance. When you access some of the APIs that, for example, get the size of a box, you get bounding recs, for example, or some scrolling dimension, etc. Those trigger what we call reflow. Reflow is the browser just rerunning all the code to determine the position and the height and the width of everything. Those APIs, if you call them too often, have a major perf impact. So it is important to have less possible of those in your code. And by doing this here, you're telling just Angular the semantics of your own callbacks. So for the cases where you just read the DOM, you use early read or read, and for the cases where you want to modify the DOM, you go for the write, and by default, if you don't specify anything, Angular would just suppose it's read, write, make, so. But it's default, but by far not the best choice. So if you know what you are doing, please call either read or write, and this way Angular will know that it will first read every callback that is just reading the DOM, and then it will do the changes. By doing this, you will have less API calls that will trigger reflow, so we will optimize your rendering of your application by just having the least minimum of reflow during the execution of the after render, after next render functions. And if ever you're interested about all the APIs that trigger reflow, you can check later on the slides that's already published on my site. There is a nice list of all the browser API that trigger the reflow and that can have a cost in terms of performance. Now, this one is partly interesting because I've been doing Angular for, I think, about 8 years, and I've used this one for a total of 0 time. The framework itself uses it, I think, in the NG4 NGF directive. So the purpose was to have an optimized read of the changes and knowing, do I need to rerun some change detection? Basically, just checking values, and you don't really need it anymore today. Maybe if you want to check for changes, go for effect. So one of the cases, who here has used it, has used ng-do-check? You, okay. Why? I could have dreamed of an answer, but this one is the best. So exactly. So this is one of the cases. It exists for very specific reasons, but like I said, you probably don't need it. And if ever, there are alternatives that you will already think probably about before even reaching to these ones. But, okay, I present you all the new ideas, but I understand totally that we do not live in a hypothetical world. You don't need to rewrite all your components today. You can just leave them as is for now, and maybe it's just like a suggestion today. If you want to write modern components, maybe go with the modern way of writing them. So if you have existing code, no need to refactor everything. Go leave them here, but start writing new components with the new APIs, with the benefits they bring. One of the benefits I very much like, I will retake the example of the destroy ref and ng-destroy. Here, I wanted to destroy to have some mechanism to clean up a component. And if you look at this, there is code related to it at 3 different locations. I have a property declared on the class, I have some initialization in a constructor, and I've got something inside the ng-destroy. 3 locations for 1 feature. That's not great for code collocation. And we could rewrite this in 2 lines. 2 lines that fit in the constructor, for example. No class anymore, no destroy that's somewhere else in the code. I've got everything in 1 location. Code collocation makes your code easier to read, easier to maintain, and you don't forget anything that's elsewhere in your code. So by just having the definition, you get an ID, and you pass it to destroy, so everything happens on the same place. And it's the same way that it works with a function. Like I said before, you see that you can extract everything inside a function, and there is nothing else than just calling a function. The function will do all the stuff for you for the cleanup. So with the new hooks, we have code collocation. And this is something I really much like. But we also need to agree that today, the world we're in is not perfect yet. When you declare an input, you try to read it in the constructor, you build your application, everything looks fine, but if you run it, it throws at runtime. So it's not perfect. The question is, we know where we are today, and there is also ideas, what could we improve? Should we go direction? Maybe some ideas, I don't know. Imagine, so how can the framework fill the gaps and understand where we need to work a little bit to improve our life in terms of DX? Some ideas, it's not something that's been worked on, but just thinking about, should we rethink about how Angular works a bit? I know that if you have some React colleagues that come on projects like that, I want to read the input directly because that's how it always worked for me. It doesn't work like that way in Angular. So what if we could have inputs in the constructor available at runtime? It would mean some major refactoring inside Angular, how it works. For you, it would be better. But should we go this way? It's kind of be weird for some people that constructor is not even DI anymore, but also some other inputs. That's an idea we could think about, maybe. But it's also interesting to listen to all of you. You're working with it probably almost every day, and do you know some use cases where everything that I show you isn't covered? Do you have use cases where you still need the hooks? And I want to say, if it's, please let us know. Open an issue saying, okay, I know that we have new hooks. I know that the previous ones, I needed it for that particular use case, and I wanted to share it with you. And that's what we are looking for. So give us some insights on the usage you have. Maybe we can introduce you to another pattern. Maybe it's something that needs to be added to the framework. So you can provide inputs to the team by teaching them how you use the framework itself. What?
You can provide inputs to the team.
Thank you so much. That was it for me.